The storm raged outside like an omen, wind howling against the windows as Luthando stepped into the silent house he thought he knew. Something felt wrong, terribly wrong. The lights flickered, the air thick with a strange unease. Then he heard it. Water splashing, frenzied and violent, coming from the bathroom at the end of the hall. His heartbeat pounded louder than the thunder as he pushed the door open, and the world shattered. There, hunched over the bathtub, was his wife Nolwazi. Her hands were pressed against his mother's shoulders, forcing Mama Zinla beneath the churning water. Bubbles rose, limbs thrashed, and Nolwazi's face was pale, empty, almost unrecognizable. "Stop!" Luthando screamed, but neither woman seemed to hear. In that single horrifying moment, he realized that whatever had been brewing in their home had exploded into a nightmare he could never have imagined. Before we continue, comment your location and the current time where you're watching from. And if you enjoy emotional African folktale dramas, feel free to subscribe to the channel for more stories. From the outside, their family had once seemed peaceful, an image polished enough to fool anyone who didn't live inside its walls. But long before the night of the bathtub tragedy, tension had already begun weaving its silent web around them. Luthando, born and raised in the small but proud home of Mama Zinla, grew up with values rooted in duty, kindness, and unwavering loyalty. He loved deeply and carried the weight of expectation even deeper. As the only child, his mother had poured every drop of her energy into shaping him into the man she believed he should become. And for the most part, she succeeded. Yet nothing had prepared him for Nolwazi. Nolwazi arrived in his life like a burst of light after a long drought. She was warm, patient, gentle, everything Mama Zinla had feared her son might never find. She came from humble beginnings and worked tirelessly as a tailor, her hands stitching together not only fabrics but dreams. Luthando admired her resilience. He found beauty in her tenderness. His heart made a decision long before his mind finished weighing the consequences. But Mama Zinla was not convinced. Whenever Nolwazi smiled at her, Mama Zinla saw shadows. Whenever Nolwazi tried to help, she interpreted it as intrusion. The older woman, hardened by years of widowhood, loss, and betrayal within her extended family, had grown protective, perhaps too protective of her son. She scrutinized every gesture Nolwazi made, as though waiting for proof of hidden intentions. In the early days after the wedding, Nolwazi tried desperately to win her mother-in-law's trust. She woke early to help prepare breakfast, cleaned the kitchen even when it wasn't her turn, brought home fresh flowers to brighten the living room, and even attempted to cook dishes from Mama Zinla's childhood. But each effort seemed to crumble before it reached its destination. "That's not how you wash vegetables," Mama Zinla would snap, snatching the bowl from her hands. "You don't need to pretend," she would mutter at the dining table, loud enough for Nolwazi to hear but quiet enough to feign innocence. "I know your type, sweet, until you get what you want." These words stung deeper than Nolwazi ever admitted. She hid her feelings from Luthando, not wanting to burden him or make him choose sides. Luthando, for his part, sensed the tension but underestimated its severity. He believed that time would soften the edges, that love would eventually bridge the distance. But love alone was not enough. Small disagreements soon grew into daily sparks. If a plate went missing, Mama Zinla accused Nolwazi of carelessness. If money disappeared from her purse, something that happened more often than anyone expected, she insinuated that Nolwazi was helping herself. Even when Nolwazi found the missing notes under the sofa and gently returned them, the damage had already been done. "You think I'm senile?" Mama Zinla snapped. "No, Mama, don't call me that." The refusal to accept the word Mama became one of the deepest cuts. Nolwazi swallowed her pain and tried again the next day, and the next, but every attempt met the same cold wall. Gradually, Nolwazi began withdrawing into herself. She spoke less at dinner, avoided crossing paths with her mother-in-law in the halls, and spent longer hours in her small sewing room. Sometimes, she sat on the edge of the bed long after midnight, her hands trembling without explanation. Memories she thought she had buried were creeping back into her life. Memories of a childhood steeped in fear, raised in a home where anger lived in every corner, and where she had learned to tiptoe around violence. Luthando noticed, of course. He held her tightly at night, asking, "Are you okay, my love?" She always answered the same, "I'm fine, just tired." But Mama Zinla read her silence differently. "To see you sulk around all day, it's disrespectful," she said one morning. "I'm not sulking," Nolwazi murmured. "I'm just what? Waiting for me to die so you can take the house." The accusation cut through the air like a blade. Nolwazi choked on her breath, unable to respond. The relationship deteriorated in small, painful doses, too bitter to swallow, too confusing to escape. And yet, none of them realized that someone else was quietly fueling this fire from the shadows. One afternoon, a vase shattered in the living room while Mama Zinla slept in her room, and Nolwazi was outside hanging laundry. They returned to find the pieces on the floor. "You broke it to make me look forgetful," Mama Zinla hissed. "No, I didn't. Liar." Another morning. The jar of medicine Mama Zinla relied on her heart tablets vanished without explanation. Nolwazi tore the house apart searching for it. They eventually found the jar behind the refrigerator, an impossible location unless someone intentionally hid it there. "So now you're trying to kill me," Mama Zinla accused. "Mama, why would I ever? Don't call me that." Luthando tried to intervene. He tried to reason with his mother, soothe Nolwazi's tears, and convince himself the situation was merely a phase. But the truth was beginning to weigh on him. The laughter that once filled their home had quietly faded. Dinner conversations became tense silences. Even walking through the hallway felt like navigating a battlefield. And still, something darker stirred beneath the surface. A week before the bathtub incident, Nolwazi found the door to her sewing room slightly open when she was certain she had closed it. Her fabric rolls were misplaced. Her scissors were missing, only to turn up later under the cushions of the living room sofa. She felt watched. She felt unsafe. And yet she couldn't explain why. That same week, Mama Zinla began keeping her bedroom door locked during the day. She whispered to neighbors that something was wrong with her daughter-in-law. She even approached the local pastor and asked him to pray against wicked spirits in the house. The situation deteriorated so quickly that even Luthando began to question his own perceptions. He wanted to believe in harmony. He wanted to believe his wife was good and his mother was fair. But the constant friction left him exhausted, and exhaustion breeds doubt. Still, he never imagined that doubt would one day lead him into a bathroom filled with splashing water, screams, and the image that would haunt him forever. The seeds of tragedy had been planted long before that night. They had been watered with misunderstanding, fear, trauma, and manipulation. And though none of them knew it yet, their lives were being carefully pushed toward a cliff by a hand they had not yet seen, a hand waiting in the shadows for the perfect moment to strike. Before the storm of hatred and suspicion swallowed their home, there had been a time brief but undeniably beautiful, when love seemed powerful enough to heal anything. That time began the day Luthando met Nolwazi. He had been repairing a fence at the market square where he volunteered during weekends. Nolwazi, carrying a heavy bundle of fabric for her tailoring business, tripped near the entrance. Without hesitation, he rushed to help her gather the scattered material. Their eyes met, and something warm bloomed in that fleeting moment, a connection neither of them fully understood yet. She thanked him shyly, brushing dust from her knees. He offered to carry her load. She refused twice, out of politeness, but he insisted with a gentle smile that made her heart soften. What started as a small gesture unfolded into a conversation, and the conversation stretched into an invitation for tea, and tea became the doorway to a love neither had been looking for but both desperately needed. Luthando admired the resilience in her eyes. Nolwazi admired the gentleness in his hands. Their love grew quietly but steadily, like a seed taking root in forgiving soil. Nolwazi came from a background she rarely spoke of, one painted with loss, hardship, and fear. She had been raised by a fragile mother who endured more pain than anyone should, and Nolwazi carried that grief like a hidden scar. Still, she hoped for a future that would look nothing like her past. Luthando became that hope, but hope is a fragile thing. When Luthando introduced her to his mother, he had believed, perhaps naively, that their love would overshadow social expectations, class differences, and the unspoken rules of tradition. Mama Zinla, however, saw Nolwazi not as her son's blessing, but as a threat. "Women who appear out of nowhere, be careful," she warned him after their first meeting. "She didn't appear out of nowhere, Mama," he insisted gently. "I met her at the market." "That's what all men think," she muttered, tightening her shawl. "Then one day she takes everything, and you wonder what you did wrong." Her words stung, but Luthando believed time would change her mind. Still, when he announced the engagement, she refused to attend the celebration. She claimed her health was failing that day, though she was seen sweeping the yard hours later. Nolwazi tried not to let the rejection sink too deep, but it did. It followed her into the wedding, where Mama Zinla sat stiffly with her arms crossed, refusing to smile even once. Yet Nolwazi held on. She believed love required patience, and she had plenty of it. Her mother had always told her that good hearts win slowly but surely. She wanted to win Mama Zinla's heart not out of obligation, but because Luthando loved her, and Nolwazi wished to give him a peaceful home. But the more Nolwazi tried, the more Mama Zinla resisted. She criticized everything: the way Nolwazi cooked, the way she dressed, the way she spoke, even the way she laughed. "You laugh too loudly," she would say. "A wife should be composed. You walk too softly. Are you sneaking around? You don't eat enough. Am I supposed to believe you're healthy?" No action pleased her. Luthando attempted to mediate, but was torn between the two women he loved most. Nolwazi never complained directly. She swallowed her pain to keep the peace. Mama Zinla, meanwhile, spoke freely about her suspicions, always painting herself as the one under attack. Still, beneath all the conflict, Nolwazi held on to their love story. She remembered their early days, walking down dusty streets while sharing jokes about the world, dreaming about starting a small business together, imagining the children they would one day raise. She remembered how Luthando would surprise her with tea on long nights when she worked late, how he traced circles on her palm when she felt anxious, how he whispered, "You're safe now," into her hair when she had nightmares. But safety, she would soon learn, can disappear without warning. Their first major conflict erupted 6 months into the marriage. It started over a misplaced envelope containing money from Luthando's part-time construction work. He always kept it in the top drawer of his bedside table. One morning, it was gone. Mama Zinla insisted she saw Nolwazi enter the bedroom around dawn. "I was looking for my sewing needles," Nolwazi argued, "and the money walked away by itself. It wasn't me. You're the only one who was in the room." Luthando searched the house thoroughly and found the envelope later in the laundry basket. He believed it was simply misplaced during cleaning, but Mama Zinla saw no coincidence. "She hides things," she said with certainty. "One day, she will take more than money." Nolwazi's hands shook the entire evening, though she tried her best to smile when Luthando put his arm around her. But he noticed the distance growing in her eyes. She was no longer the spirited woman he met at the market. Something inside her had begun to dim. Then came the strange nights. One evening, Nolwazi woke up to the sound of footsteps outside their bedroom. Soft, deliberate steps. She nudged Luthando awake, but by the time he listened, the noise had stopped. Another night, she heard whispering in the hallway, too low to understand, but sharp enough to sound hostile. When she opened the door, no one was there. She wondered if stress was making her imagine things. But then, Mama Zinla started complaining about missing items: her prayer beads, her reading glasses, her necklace. She accused Nolwazi every time. Luthando defended his wife at first, but repeated incidents wore down his confidence. Doubt crept in, not enough to shatter trust, but enough to make him wonder. Even so, he clung to their love story. He remembered the promise he had made to himself to protect Nolwazi, to give her a home where she would not relive the pain of her childhood. But love does not always shield people from the storms they do not see coming. As the tension between the women escalated, Nolwazi's behavior began to shift in ways she could not explain. She startled easily. She forgot simple things. Her hands trembled without cause. Some mornings, she found herself crying with no clear reason. She felt trapped between a mother-in-law who despised her and a husband she feared she might lose. And worst of all, memories from her past began resurfacing, unwanted, uninvited. She remembered her mother's screams. She remembered the sound of water. She remembered the moment she walked into a bathroom as a child and saw her mother's head forced beneath the surface while her stepfather raged above her. It was a trauma she had buried long ago. But in this house, under this pressure, those memories clawed their way back to the surface. Luthando noticed the changes but misread them. He thought she was merely stressed. He didn't realize she was quietly unraveling. Meanwhile, Mama Zinla grew even colder. She saw Nolwazi's emotional instability as manipulation. "She's pretending," she insisted. "She wants sympathy." Their home, once filled with hope, had become a battleground. But even then, neither woman wished for harm. Their pain was real, their fears valid, but the poisonous hand pushing them toward conflict was still invisible. The day would come when all their broken pieces collided violently in the bathroom. But long before the splashing water and desperate screams, their tragedy began here. In love misunderstood, in trauma unhealed, and in the cracks of a family tearing itself apart. The shift from quiet tension to open hostility came slowly at first, like rain building into a storm. It began with small disturbances, things easily dismissed, easily blamed on forgetfulness or coincidence. But each incident, no matter how petty it seemed, added another layer to the unease settling over the household. It started one afternoon when Mama Zinla found her favorite mug shattered on the kitchen floor. She had left it drying on the counter an hour earlier. Nolwazi had been in the sewing room, humming quietly as she worked on a customer's dress. No one else had been home. "You expect me to believe it broke itself?" Mama Zinla demanded, raising the jagged pieces in her hands. "I didn't touch it," Nolwazi whispered, startled by the accusation. "You're the only one who could have, unless spirits walk freely through this house now." The confrontation ended with Nolwazi in tears, and Luthando stepping in, gently guiding his mother away while insisting it was probably an accident. But behind closed doors, he sighed heavily, frustration growing beneath his calm demeanor. It wasn't just the broken mug. It was everything. The missing items, the harsh comments, the constant sense that conflict hovered over them. Still, he tried to believe the best of both women. His mother, a strong woman hardened by life's tragedies. His wife, a soft-spoken soul who rarely raised her voice. He clung to the hope that eventually they would find a way to coexist. But even he sensed something was off, something beyond personality clashes or misunderstandings. The next sign appeared 2 days later. Nolwazi opened her sewing room closet and gasped. Her fabric rolls had been sliced in several places, jagged cuts running through expensive cloth she had saved for months. The damage was too purposeful to be accidental. She hurried to show Luthando. "Who would do this?" she asked, voice trembling. He frowned, examining the cuts. "It must be rats. These are straight lines, Luthando. Maybe you left scissors inside." "No, I never." She stopped herself before the tears fell. She needed him to believe her. And crying always made Mama Zinla call her dramatic. But the worst was still to come. That evening, Mama Zinla stormed into the living room, holding her pill bottle empty. "Who touched this?" she demanded. "I didn't," Nolwazi said quickly. "And we're supposed to trust your word now. It wasn't me. You expect me to die here. Is that your goal?" The accusation struck like lightning. Luthando stepped between them. "No one wants you harmed, Mama. Please calm down." "She wants me gone," Mama Zinla shouted, pointing directly at Nolwazi. "Ever since she entered this house, things disappear, my money, my belongings, my peace." Nolwazi felt her body go cold. as though she were watching the scene from outside of herself. "I would never harm you," she said, voice cracking. "Why would you think that? Because I saw you near my room this morning. Don't pretend you don't know." Nolwazi shook her head. "I was looking for the laundry basket. You were looking for my pills." The conversation spiraled until Nolwazi fled to the bedroom, locking the door behind her. Inside, she broke down in a way she had not allowed herself to before. She felt powerless. She felt hunted. The house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a cage. Meanwhile, Mama Zinla muttered to herself in her room, pacing anxiously. Her suspicions were no longer whispers. They were convictions. She believed Nolwazi wanted to erase her, remove her from her son's life. Fear wrapped around her thoughts like thorns, piercing deeper each day. And yet, neither woman could see that they were being pushed from the shadows. 2 nights later, the house experienced its most disturbing incident yet. At midnight, a loud crash echoed through the hallway. Luthando sprang awake, his heart pounding. Nolwazi clutched his arm. "There's someone in the house," she whispered. They crept out of the bedroom and found the hallway mirror shattered on the floor. The frame lay twisted, as though ripped from its hooks. The shards reflected fragments of their frightened faces. "How did this fall?" Luthando asked. "It didn't fall," Nolwazi said. "Someone pulled it down." Before they could investigate further, Mama Zinla appeared at her doorway, breathless. "My mirror!" she cried. "Why would you break it?" "We just got here," Luthando protested. "She did it." Mama Zinla pointed at Nolwazi, eyes wild. "She hates me. She wants to curse me." That night, Nolwazi refused to sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, arms wrapped around herself, trying to steady her breath. "I feel like someone is watching me," she murmured. "Every time I'm alone, I hear footsteps. I hear whispering. I swear someone is in the house, Luthando. I swear I'm not imagining this. Munning." He held her, stroking her back, but his eyes drifted toward the door. He, too, felt the unsettling presence lingering in the air. The next morning confirmed Nolwazi's fear. Her sewing scissors, missing for days, were found under Mama Zinla's pillow. The older woman screamed when she discovered them. "See? She wants to kill me in my sleep." "I didn't put them there," Nolwazi cried. "You're dangerous." And just like that, the fragile thread between them snapped. Nolwazi stopped trying to defend herself. Mama Zinla stopped pretending she wanted peace. Luthando began sleeping less, his face hollow with fatigue, but hidden behind the escalating chaos was a truth none of them understood. Someone was orchestrating this unraveling, a hand none of them saw, a presence moving between rooms, leaving destruction behind like footprints. One afternoon, as Nolwazi walked through the marketplace, a man bumped into her too intentionally to be accidental. When she turned, he vanished into the crowd. She felt her skin prickle. She had seen him before, lurking near their house, watching her from afar, disappearing whenever she tried to approach. She told Luthando, but he brushed it off. That same evening, Mama Zinla received a folded note slipped under her door. "She will finish you. Be careful." The handwriting was jagged, unfamiliar, the message short, terrifying. Mama Zinla's fear deepened into paranoia. She began locking her door even during the day. She kept her phone hidden and her purse clutched close. Nolwazi began losing her grip on reality. Sometimes she felt a shadow behind her when she stood at the sink. Sometimes she heard someone breathing near her sewing table. She found doors open that she had closed, windows unlocked that she knew she had secured. She began doubting herself, her memory, her sanity, her very place in the world. The house itself felt alive, pushing them further apart. By the end of that week, all 3 members of the family were living in silent dread, each believing a different truth, each slipping deeper into emotional exhaustion. What none of them realized, what none of them could even imagine, was that someone else was moving among them, setting traps with precision, feeding fear into the cracks of their hearts. That unseen presence had only just begun preparing them for the tragedy that would soon unfold in the bathroom. where water, fear, and hidden motives would collide in a moment that changed everything. The days that followed grew heavier, thick with a tension that clung to every wall in the house. What had once been mere discomfort had now deepened into a cold, suffocating fear, one that all three occupants felt in different ways. Nolwazi felt watched. Mama Zinla felt hunted. Luthando felt helpless. And beneath all of it, an unseen force continued to stir the storm, wrapping its fingers around every crack in the family's already fragile foundation. It began with the neighbor's warning. On a warm afternoon, as Nolwazi returned from the market carrying vegetables, Mrs. Kumalo, their elderly neighbor who tended to her flowers with almost religious devotion, approached her with quick, worried steps. "My child," she whispered, gripping Nolwazi's arm tightly. "You must be careful." Nolwazi blinked in confusion. "Careful? About what?" "There is a man I have seen, lurking around your home at night. I thought he was a visitor at first. But he hides behind the trees. He stands near your window sometimes." A chill crawled up Nolwazi's spine. "Did you see his face?" "No," the old woman said, shaking her head. "But he moves like someone who has no business being there." That night, Nolwazi told Luthando. Instead of relief, his reaction was a mixture of fear and guilt. "Why didn't anyone tell me this earlier?" he muttered, pacing the room. "I thought it was nothing," Nolwazi admitted. "But now, I'm scared." He pulled her into his arms. "I'll check around the house tonight. I won't let anything happen to you." But the fear did not loosen its grip. Later that week, something far more unsettling occurred. While on her way to the market again, Nolwazi sensed that someone was following her. It was not the typical paranoia she had felt before. This time she heard footsteps, soft but persistent. When she turned around, she caught a glimpse of a man disappearing behind a stall. His clothing blended into the shadows, and she couldn't make out his face. She walked faster. So did he. She stopped. He stopped. She entered a crowded area, and only then did he slip away. By the time she returned home, her hands were trembling so violently that the vegetables nearly spilled from her bag. "What happened?" Luthando asked, concern tightening his features. "There was someone," she whispered. "He followed me." "I'm sure of it." He tried to calm her, but even he couldn't shake the chill of dread settling over him. And yet, without evidence, without a face or a name, there was nothing he could do, nothing he could report, nothing he could protect them from, except with words and presence. But presence alone wasn't enough. Over the next few days, strange disruptions in the house multiplied. A chair appeared, moved in the middle of the living room when all three insisted they had not touched it. The back door, always locked, was found slightly ajar at dawn. A spoon clattered in the kitchen when no one was inside. Nolwazi woke one night, convinced she had heard footsteps outside her bedroom door. Heavy and slow, she shook Luthando awake. He listened, but heard nothing. "You're exhausted," he murmured. "Maybe it's your nerves." But she could feel it. Someone had entered the house. Someone had watched her sleep. Even Mama Zinla began sensing something beyond Nolwazi's supposed mischief. She started hearing knocking sounds at odd hours. Once, she woke to the uneasy feeling that her bedroom door had been opened while she slept. She began locking it every evening and placing a chair against it, not because she trusted Nolwazi, but because something told her that danger lurked beyond more than one source. Still, in her fear, she blamed only one person, her daughter-in-law. The worst blow came when Mama Zinla discovered her prayer beads scattered across the bathroom floor. Some beads cracked as if stomped on. "My sacred beads," she wailed, lifting them with trembling hands. Nolwazi stood in the doorway, stunned. "I didn't do that. You expect me to believe you when destruction follows you like a shadow. I wasn't even in the bathroom today." Luthando stepped between them. "Please, enough." But the argument only worsened when Mama Zinla held up her phone and revealed a message she had received earlier that morning. "She will bring ruin to your home. Watch her." The sender was unknown. Nolwazi's heart plummeted. "Why would someone send you that?" "Very." "Because they see what I see," Mama Zinla snapped. The seed of paranoia had taken firm root inside her. In her mind, everything connected back to Nolwazi. Every noise, every missing item, every unsettling disturbance in the home. Even the shadowy man now had a role in her imagination, an accomplice, a witness, or perhaps someone Nolwazi had invited into their lives. Nolwazi grew quieter. She stopped defending herself as fiercely. She stopped trying to ease tensions. She began to feel as though the world around her was closing in. She felt watched, not only by the stranger but by the walls themselves, by the doubt in her husband's eyes, by the hatred in her mother-in-law's voice. She began to question her own sanity. Sometimes she forgot simple tasks. Sometimes she walked into a room and couldn't recall why. Sometimes she thought she heard someone calling her name soft, taunting, close. One morning, she awoke with scratches on her arm, thin, straight, as though etched with something sharp. She stared at them, horrified, because she could not remember how they got there. When she showed Luthando, he cupped her face and whispered, "My love, you need rest. You're under too much stress." But his eyes flickered with uncertainty, and Nolwazi felt that flicker like a knife. Meanwhile, Mama Zinla's own fear continued to escalate. She began carrying a wooden spoon in her pocket, muttering prayers beneath her breath, as though warding off evil spirits. One afternoon, she confronted Nolwazi directly in the living room. "You think I don't know your game," she hissed. "I don't have a game," Nolwazi whispered. "You want my son all to yourself. You want me gone. That's not true. You can lie to him, but you cannot lie to me. I will not let you destroy this family." Her voice shook not with anger alone, but with genuine terror. And Nolwazi, she simply stood there, unable to fight back, unable to flee. It was that same evening that Luthando heard something strange while walking outside the house. Soft crunching of leaves, footsteps too heavy to be an animal. He turned sharply, hoping to catch whoever had been stalking Nolwazi, but the figure slipped into the night like smoke. When Luthando returned inside, his mind raced with questions. Who was this man? Why was he watching them? Did he have anything to do with the escalating chaos? He didn't know. He couldn't know. And yet, someone somewhere continued tightening the invisible rope around their home. The final sign came 3 days later. Nolwazi entered the kitchen and froze. On the counter sat a torn photograph of her, one she kept cherished in a drawer. Her face had been scratched out entirely, her knees buckled. She knew then, without doubt, someone wanted her to break, and she was breaking. By the end of the week, all 3 members of the household were living in a state of frightened exhaustion, their nerves frayed, their trust eroded. But the truth that a stranger's hand was guiding their destruction remained hidden, and soon, very soon, that stranger's presence would manifest in a way none of them could ignore, pushing them toward the moment when everything would explode in the bathroom. The discovery of the hidden camera was the moment their world truly began to unravel. Until then, every strange occurrence could be blamed on paranoia, clumsiness, or misunderstanding. But this was something none of them could explain away. It shattered whatever sense of normalcy they had been desperately clinging to. It proved that the disturbances in their home were not accidents or hallucinations. Someone was watching them. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. The air was heavy and humid, and Luthando had decided to fix the flickering light in the hallway. He dragged a chair beneath the bulb and climbed up with a screwdriver. As he worked, he felt something odd behind the lamp fixture, something small, metallic, and out of place. When he tugged at it gently, the device loosened and dropped into his hand. It was a miniature camera, no bigger than a matchbox. He froze. His skin went cold. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Nolwazi, who had been cleaning in the living room, heard the clatter and came running. "What happened?" she asked, voice tight with worry. He stared at the object, unable to form words. "What is that?" she pressed. He handed it to her silently. She cupped the tiny device in her palm and felt terror crawl through her veins. "A camera," she whispered. "Yes," he said in a hollow voice. "Someone hid this in the hallway. The hallway where every argument, every tense exchange, every private moment had occurred. When they showed it to Mama Zinla, her reaction was immediate and explosive. "You put this here," she shouted at Nolwazi. "What, no? You want to record me, shame me, destroy my dignity? I didn't even know this existed." "Lies." Luthando stepped in quickly. "Mama, she didn't put it here. Why would she? This was aimed at all of us. Don't defend her. I'm defending the truth." But the truth was far more complex than any of them knew. They called the police. Officers came, examined the device, asked questions none of them could answer. The camera had no fingerprints, no branding, no identifying marks. Whoever installed it knew exactly what they were doing. The officers suggested the intruder might return, so they advised the family to keep doors locked, windows secured, and lights on at night. Their house was no longer a sanctuary. It had become a hunting ground. After the officers left, the three of them sat in the living room, each lost in their own world of fear. Silence stretched thin between them. Finally, Mama Zinla spoke. "This is her fault. Mama, stop." Luthando groaned. "Ever since she came, everything has gone wrong. Now we have people spying on us. Why? Because someone is after her." "That doesn't make sense," Nolwazi whispered, exhausted. "You're bringing danger into my home." "This is my home too," Nolwazi murmured weakly. "Not anymore." The words cut deeper than any blade. Later that evening, Luthando searched the entire house for more devices. He checked behind picture frames, under tables, inside cabinets, along windowsills, and then he found the second camera. This one was hidden inside a decorative bowl on the mantel, its lens perfectly aligned with the living room couch. It had been watching them for weeks, maybe months. Everything, the arguments, the accusations, the tears had been recorded. When Nolwazi saw the second device, she burst into tears. "What if he's been in the house when we sleep?" "I don't know," Luthando whispered, pulling her close. "I don't know anything anymore. He wanted to protect her. But how do you protect someone from an invisible intruder with unknown motives?" Mama Zinla, however, reacted with pure panic. "You see, he's watching us. He's after me. I know it." "No one is after you, Mama," Luthando insisted. "Then who? Who wants to see me suffer? Who wants to see our lives fall apart?" She jabbed a trembling finger at Nolwazi. "It's her. She brought this." Nolwazi broke at that moment. Something inside her snapped quietly, silently, like a thread pulled too tight. She didn't scream or lash out. She simply turned away and sat on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at the wall. Luthando noticed. He approached her carefully. "My love." She didn't respond. "We will get through this." Silence. "Talk to me." Still nothing. He touched her shoulder gently, and she flinched as though burned. When she finally looked at him, her eyes were hollow, empty in a way that frightened him more than anything else. "I'm losing myself," she whispered. "You're not. I can't breathe in this house. We'll fix it. You can't fix what's inside my mind." Her words chilled him. Meanwhile, Mama Zinla barricaded herself in her room. She moved her dresser in front of the door and placed a chair beneath the handle. She even stuffed a towel under the crack to prevent someone from slipping something inside. She prayed loudly, pacing, muttering scriptures as though warding off demons. The tension became so thick that even the air felt hostile. And then came the sounds. Late one night, Nolwazi heard soft footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate, approaching her bedroom door. She shook Luthando awake. He sat up, listening. Thud. Pause. Thud. When he opened the door, no one was there. The hallway lights flickered, and the silence that followed was deafening. 2 nights later, they heard whispering near the bathroom. A soft, hushed voice. Male. Luthando ran out, armed with a lamp, but the hallway was empty. The bathroom door creaked open gently, as though someone had just slipped inside. Mama Zinla screamed from her room. "I heard breathing. Someone is outside my door." Every sound in the house now felt like a threat. They installed new locks. They checked windows twice a day. Luthando began sleeping near the door. Nolwazi kept a pair of scissors in her nightstand. Mama Zinla slept with her Bible clutched to her chest. Still, the fear didn't fade. One morning, while Luthando was at work, Nolwazi heard a tapping sound at the kitchen window. When she looked, she saw a shadow move swiftly out of sight. She rushed outside but found nothing but footprints in the dirt, large, heavy footprints that circled the house. When she told Luthando, he didn't doubt her, not anymore. But Mama Zinla interpreted everything differently. "He is after me," she insisted. "He wants to hurt me because she opened the door to him." "That makes no sense," Luthando argued. "It makes perfect sense. She is the reason this house is cursed." Every day, the tension grew sharper. Every night, the unseen presence pushed them closer to breaking. The final breaking point came when Luthando discovered a third camera, this one, inside the bathroom vent. The bathroom, the place where the tragedy would later unfold. Someone had been watching their most vulnerable moments. This time, even Mama Zinla didn't blame Nolwazi. Her face went pale, and she sank into a chair, whispering, "We are not alone here. Someone wants something from us. But what? Why? And who?" None of them understood that the answers were closer than they imagined. Someone had been entering their home. Someone had been moving between rooms like a ghost. Someone had been planting fear with surgical precision. Someone who knew them. Someone who hated one of them deeply. Someone waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And soon, that moment would come. Everything was leading toward the bathroom. Everything was building toward the night when water, rage, fear, and manipulation would collide. And nothing would be the same afterward. Long before the cameras, the shattered objects, and the unseen footsteps, there was a wound inside Nolwazi that had never fully healed, a wound she had buried so deeply that even she believed it was gone. But trauma has a way of resurfacing when life begins to echo the past, and in Nolwazi's case, the echoes grew louder with every confrontation, every accusation, every moment. She felt cornered in a home that was supposed to be her sanctuary. It began with nightmares. At first, they came occasionally, fleeting and disjointed images of water, screaming, and shadows gripping her wrists. Nolwazi would wake with her heart pounding, breath trembling, but convince herself it was merely stress. But as the tension in the house escalated, the nightmares grew sharper, clearer, more vivid. She woke nightly drenched in sweat, the sound of running water ringing in her ears even after she sat up in bed. One morning, Luthando found her sitting on the edge of the mattress, staring blankly at the wall. "My love," he whispered, touching her shoulder. "You didn't sleep again." She nodded weakly. "I keep seeing things." He frowned with concern. "What things?" She opened her mouth, but fear strangled the words before they could escape. Instead, she simply murmured, "Just dreams." But they weren't just dreams. They were memories, ones she had spent her whole life trying to suffocate. The truth began unraveling the day she entered the bathroom and froze. Not because of any intruder, not because of broken items or missing objects, but because the sound of the faucet dripping triggered something deep within her. The rhythmic plink, plink, plink of water hitting the porcelain sent a tremor through her body, and suddenly she wasn't in the present anymore. She was 6 years old again. She stood barefoot on the cold tile floor of her childhood home, watching water swirl in a half-filled bathtub. Her mother, a gentle woman with tired eyes and a soft voice, knelt beside the tub. Behind her stood Nolwazi's stepfather, a man whose temper darkened the entire household. The memory came rushing back in painful clarity. Her mother had whispered, "Please, just stop." Her voice trembling. Her stepfather's voice was a storm of rage, his hands gripping her mother's shoulders, pushing her closer to the water. Nolwazi could not move. Her small limbs were paralyzed with fear as she watched the man she feared more than anything force her mother's head beneath the surface. She heard the muffled thrashing, saw the water churn violently, felt the entire room spin around her. And then, "Mama." The memory shattered as Nolwazi collapsed onto the bathroom floor, trembling uncontrollably. She covered her ears, trying to silence the sounds that only she could hear. From that moment, the line between memory and present began to blur. Every harsh word from Mama Zinla reminded her of her stepfather's cruelty. Every accusation echoed the fear she once felt for her mother. Every moment of being trapped inside that house revived the terror of being a helpless child again. She tried to hide the turmoil from Luthando, but trauma is not easily masked. One evening, as they ate dinner, Nolwazi suddenly dropped her spoon and gasped. "What's wrong?" Luthando asked. "I heard." She stopped herself. It was the sound of water sloshing, the same sound from her nightmares. But when she looked up, everything was normal. The fear, however, did not leave her eyes. "Are you sure you're okay?" he pressed gently. "Yes," she insisted, forcing a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Just tired." But he could see the truth. Meanwhile, Mama Zingla misinterpreted every sign of Nolwazi's trauma as disrespect, deceit, or manipulation. The more Nolwazi withdrew, the more Mama Zingla believed she was hiding something sinister. "Look at her," she whispered to a neighbor one day. "She walks around like a ghost. She doesn't speak. She watches me. She seems like a kind girl," the neighbor said. "She is pretending," Mama Zingla snapped. "I know when someone wants to harm me." But in truth, Nolwazi wasn't watching her. She was watching the shadows. She began checking door locks repeatedly throughout the day. Sometimes, she checked the same door 5 or 6 times in an hour, unable to trust that it was truly secure. She jumped at sudden noises. She avoided the bathroom unless absolutely necessary. She even stopped taking long showers, afraid the sound of running water would trap her in another memory. One night, when the power went out, Nolwazi screamed so loudly that the neighbors heard. "It's dark," she cried. I can't see anything." Luthando held her tightly, whispering, "You're safe. I'm here." But her trembling didn't stop. The next morning, when she went to fetch laundry from the backyard, she froze at the sight of a deep set of footprints leading toward the window. The same window near her sewing table, the same place she often felt watched. Her body locked in fear, her vision blurred, her breathing became ragged. She ran into the house, shouting for Luthando. He rushed outside and saw the footprints. Large, heavy, fresh. Something inside him snapped. "This isn't your imagination," he murmured, pulling her into his arms. "Someone has been here. Someone has been watching." His words should have brought comfort. Instead, they triggered something deep and dangerous inside. Nolwazi confirmation that the danger she sensed was real, immediate, and closing in around her. While the truth terrified her, it also reopened a memory she had avoided for decades. That night, she dreamed again of her mother's final moments. But this time, she remembered something she had forgotten as a child. She remembered trying to pull her stepfather away. She remembered slipping and falling into the water. She remembered her mother's eyes wide, terrified, desperate. She remembered the feeling of helplessness as her mother's body went limp. She woke screaming. Luthando held her as she sobbed uncontrollably. "It wasn't your fault," he whispered, though he didn't know the details. But Nolwazi felt the guilt like poison. She had been there. She had watched. She had done nothing. The memory had haunted her silently for years, shaped her fears, broken pieces of her that she had never spoken about. And now, living with an older woman who despised her, a house that felt unsafe, and a man stalking their family in the shadows, the past felt as though it were happening again. One afternoon, Nolwazi found herself staring into the bathtub, the water reflecting her distorted face. She felt a wave of dizziness crash over her. Her hand trembled as she reached toward the faucet. For a brief, terrifying moment, she imagined someone forcing her beneath the surface. She jerked back violently, gasping. From that day on, she avoided the bathroom whenever possible. She used the guest toilet instead. She washed her face at the kitchen sink. She brushed her teeth hurriedly, avoiding the mirror. The bathroom where water echoed memories had become a place of horror, but the irony was cruel. The bathroom was also where someone unseen, lurking, plotting, had installed a hidden camera. Someone knew the power that water held over Nolwazi. Someone knew her fear. The cracks in her mind widened. The shadows grew sharper. The whispers became louder. And as her trauma deepened, it became easier, far easier for someone to manipulate her reality, pushing her toward actions she would never have chosen in a stable state of mind. Someone wanted her vulnerable, unstable, unpredictable. Someone wanted her to break, and the night she would break was approaching swiftly. Inside her heart, the storm was gathering force. Inside the house, danger was drawing nearer, and inside the bathroom, where her past and present would soon collide, fate waited silent, dark, inevitable. The anonymous message arrived early in the morning, slipped beneath Mama Zinla's door so quietly that no one heard it being delivered. The sun had barely risen when she spotted the folded paper on her floor. At first, she assumed it was a bill or a misplaced receipt, but when she picked it up, she sensed something colder, an uneasiness that crawled across her skin. The handwriting was sharp, almost aggressive, the letters jagged like wounds carved by a trembling hand. She will kill you the way her mother was killed. Those words, strung together in cruel simplicity, struck her like lightning. Her breath hitched. The room spun. She clutched the frame of her dresser to steady herself. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't think, could only stare at the message as dread pooled in her stomach. She didn't know what had happened to Nolwazi's mother. She'd never cared to ask. She had only assumed the woman had fallen ill, died of misfortune, or left early in Nolwazi's life. But now it suggested something darker, something violent, something that sounded almost like a warning whispered from the grave. Suddenly, all of the strange events in the house took on new meaning in her mind. The scissors found under her pillow, the prayer beads broken on the floor, the vanishing medication, the footsteps outside her room. And now this message. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she whispered to herself, "I knew it. I knew she was dangerous." She stormed out of her room, gripping the note as though it were a weapon. She found Nolwazi at the kitchen sink, washing vegetables for breakfast. The younger woman looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her hands trembling slightly as she worked. "What is this?" Mama Zinla shouted, waving the note in the air. Startled, Nolwazi dropped a tomato, which rolled across the counter. "What are you talking about? Don't pretend you don't know," the older woman snapped, thrusting the message into her face. Nolwazi took it, confused, as her eyes scanned the words, her face drained of color. I didn't write this," she whispered. "Of course you did. Who else would? I don't even know who put this under your door. You lying snake." Luthando heard the commotion and rushed into the kitchen. "Mama, what's happening now? Your wife," Mama Zinla spat, "wants to kill me the way her mother died." Luthando froze. "What?" he asked carefully. "What are you talking about?" She thrust the note toward him. He read it slowly, his brow furrowing. "Nolwazi," he said, turning to her. "What does this mean?" "I don't know," she cried. "I swear I don't know." But her eyes flickered just slightly and he saw something he had never seen before. Deep, paralyzing fear. He didn't recognize it, didn't understand it. But the sight unsettled him. "Why would someone write this?" Mama Zinla continued, voice trembling with righteous fury. "Why would they say you killed your mother unless it is the truth?" "I didn't kill her," Nolwazi whispered. "I was a child. I saw something horrible, but I didn't." She stopped herself, unable to continue as her chest tightened painfully. Luthando stepped closer. "What did you see?" She shook her head. "Not now. Please, not now." But Mama Zinla was relentless. Tell us how your mother died. It's not what you think. Everything is exactly what I think." Her voice rose higher and sharper, echoing off the kitchen walls. Nolwazi backed away, her breath quickening, tears forming in her eyes. "You're sick," Mama Zinla hissed. "You're evil. You brought death into this home." "Stop," Luthando said firmly. "You're going too far." But his mother rounded on him. You think I will sit here and wait for her to kill me? I will not. Her voice broke on the last word, revealing the depth of her terror. And beneath her fear, a new seed took root, an idea that Nolwazi was not just untrustworthy, but dangerous, capable of repeating the violence she had witnessed, capable of finishing what had begun years ago, in another bathroom, another place, another life. As she stormed back to her room, slamming the door behind her, Nolwazi collapsed onto a chair, shaking uncontrollably. I can't take this anymore, she whispered. I'm losing myself. Luthando knelt beside her. My love, what happened to your mother? She squeezed her eyes shut. I don't want to talk about it, but you have to, he urged gently. This is tearing us apart, she cried silently, her tears streaming down her cheeks like a river long held back. My stepfather, she whispered. He drowned her. Luthando's breath caught. He felt the world around him tighten. He held her under the water, she continued, choking on the memory. I tried to stop him, but I was small. I couldn't save her. Her body shook with grief. Luthando wrapped his arms around her. My love, that wasn't your fault. She died, Nolwazi sobbed, and I watched. I watched until she stopped moving. As she cried, the bathroom down the hallway seemed to hum in eerie silence, as though it remembered too. Over the next several days, the household fell into a deeper level of chaos. Mama Zinla locked her door even during broad daylight. Whispering prayers with trembling lips, she moved scissors and knives out of sight and refused to eat anything. Nolwazi cooked. If Nolwazi entered a room, Mama Zinla left it immediately. If Nolwazi walked down the hall, Mama Zinla pressed herself against the opposite wall as though passing near her would invoke death. But worst of all, Nolwazi felt the shift inside herself, the widening chasm between her mind and reality. Every accusation chipped another piece of her stability away. Every confrontation blurred the line between present and past. She began losing time, forgetting moments. She started having intrusive flashbacks when triggered by water sounds. Sometimes, she would hear her mother's voice calling her name. Sometimes, she would feel a phantom hand pushing her shoulder when she approached the sink. Sometimes she caught her reflection in the mirror and didn't recognize her own eyes. Meanwhile, the anonymous tormentor increased their attacks. A second message appeared in the pantry. She wants to finish what she started. Then another. Be careful. She watches you at night. Each note amplified Mama Zinla's terror. Each note deepened Nolwazi's instability. Each note placed Luthando further in the impossible middle. And all the while, the shadowed figure continued lurking around the house, slipping between trees, hiding behind walls, watching through windows, waiting. One evening, while Nolwazi washed dishes, the kitchen light flickered. The sound of water triggered her trauma again. As she stared into the sink, she suddenly felt a dark figure behind her. She snapped around, heart pounding. No one was there, but the window was open, and a footprint rested on the sill. She screamed. Luthando came running. When he saw the footprint, his jaw clenched. This is not paranoia, he whispered. But Mama Zinla interpreted the scream differently. She's losing control, she cried. She will snap one day, and when she does, I will be the one who dies. The fear inside her had reached a breaking point, and as fear often does, it prepared the house for tragedy. Because when terror grips one person, it is dangerous. When it grips two people, it is deadly. But when it grips an entire household already divided by mistrust, disaster becomes inevitable. And the person orchestrating this disaster, the shadow watching them, knew exactly when and where it would strike. The bathroom, the water, the place where a past death echoed into the present, the place waiting for another. The pieces of the puzzle finally began to shift into place. The day Luthando encountered a detail he could no longer ignore. Something that connected the stalking, the hidden cameras, the threatening notes, and the escalating war within his home. It was a realization that sat just out of reach for weeks, disguised beneath fear, exhaustion, and chaos. But once the truth began to emerge, it did so with ruthless clarity. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. The kind of day that should have passed quietly. Nolwazi was resting in the bedroom, emotionally drained from another heated exchange with Mama Zinla. The older woman was in the backyard, pretending to prune flowers while watching the house with suspicion, and Luthando, desperate for clarity, searched through the old storage boxes in the attic, hoping to find anything that might explain the strange disturbances. He wasn't sure what he expected to find, but it certainly wasn't the envelope marked with his cousin's name, Sibusiso. The mere sight of that name caused a sharp jolt in his chest. Sibusiso, his late father's nephew, a man who had drifted in and out of their lives like a shadow, a man who had always carried a hint of resentment beneath his friendly smile, a man who believed, deep in his bones, that he deserved more than fate had given him. Hands trembling, Luthando opened the envelope. Inside were legal documents regarding inheritance papers outlining the distribution of property after Luthando's father's death. Documents stating clearly that Luthando, as the only child, inherited everything. Sibusiso was left with nothing. But the documents weren't what made Luthando's blood run cold. What terrified him was the small piece of paper tucked between the pages, a rough sketch of their house, with several areas circled in red marker. The hallway, the living room, the bathroom, the exact places where cameras had been found. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. His eyes raced across the page as the realization sank in. Sibusiso knew the house. Sibusiso had been inside the house. Sibusiso had been watching them. And suddenly, every strange event, the noises, the missing items, the footprints outside, took on a horrifying new meaning. He stumbled down the attic stairs and went straight to the backyard. "Mama," he called sharply. She looked up, startled. "What is it?" "We need to talk," he said, holding the envelope. Inside the house, in the privacy of the living room, he revealed the documents. Her eyes widened. "Sibusiso. What does he have to do with anything?" "I think he's been inside our home," she gasped. "That boy. But why?" But Luthando had already begun piecing it together. "He was jealous of my inheritance," he said slowly. "He said it many times. He always believed he deserved part of the estate. When Papa died, he begged for help. You refused. I refused because he is irresponsible." Mama Zinla snapped, but her voice trembled. "Are you saying he did all of this? The cameras? The stalking?" "Yes," Luthando said. "I think he wants to break this family apart. He wants me isolated, vulnerable, distracted." "But why target me?" she demanded. "Because you're the last obstacle between him and access to anything he might be trying to manipulate. Because if something happened to you, or if he made it seem like Nolwazi wanted to harm you, it would destroy us completely." As he spoke, his voice quivered with the weight of the truth. "He wants chaos," Luthando continued. "He wants us confused, broken, and he wants Nolwazi to fall apart." "Why her?" Mama Zinla whispered. "Because she's the easiest to manipulate," he replied. "He knows she's fragile. He knows her past. He knows how to push her toward fear." Mama Zinla felt her stomach twist. For the first time, she considered the possibility that she had misjudged Nolwazi, not entirely, but enough to regret her own harshness. But how could Sibusiso know about her mother? She asked. Luthando began piecing together the fragments of their misery. "He visited often, during the early months of our marriage," he recalled. "He asked questions about Nolwazi, personal questions. I didn't think much of it at the time. But now it all made sense. The timing of the disturbances, the stealth and knowledge of the house layout, the calculated way each incident drove a wedge deeper between the women, the way fear had positioned Nolwazi as the villain in her own home. He's been manipulating all of us," Luthando said bitterly, "turning us against each other." Just then, Nolwazi entered the room, eyes puffy from crying. "What's happening?" she asked softly. Both Luthando and Mama Zinla turned to her, and for a rare moment, their expressions were united not in anger, but in shock. Luthando approached her gently. "We found something important." He explained everything: the envelope, the documents, the sketch of the house. As he spoke, Nolwazi's face paled. "Sibusiso," she whispered, "but he was always so polite to me." "That was part of his act," Luthando said. "He knew how to hide his intentions, but why would he do this?" She asked. "He wants to destroy us," Luthando said quietly, "one piece at a time." For a moment, the room was silent. The truth lingered in the air, heavy and suffocating, but something shifted, something fragile but important. For the first time in months, Nolwazi wasn't being blamed. She wasn't being accused. She wasn't being viewed as a threat. Instead, she was part of the same nightmare. Mama Zinla sank into a chair, her hand pressed to her forehead. I didn't want to believe she was truly dangerous. But the notes, the cameras. "She didn't do any of that," Luthando said. "Sibusiso wanted you to see her as the enemy." Nolwazi swallowed hard, tears welling in her eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered to Mama Zinla. "I wanted us to be a family." The older woman closed her eyes. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. "I have been harsh, too harsh. But fear blinded me." The apology wasn't spoken aloud, not yet, but something in her voice softened. For the first time, Nolwazi felt seen. But the relief was short-lived, because if Sibusiso had been watching them for months, manipulating every moment, then he wasn't done yet. The chaos he'd created was not an accident. It was a precursor. Something bigger was coming. Later that evening, Luthando called the police again, reporting his suspicions, but without concrete evidence, no fingerprints, no sightings, no footage showing Sibusiso entering the house. The officers could only file a report. "It's not enough," Luthando murmured after hanging up the phone. "He's still out there." That night, none of them slept. Nolwazi lay awake, haunted by the new truth. Mama Zinla clutched her Bible, whispering shaky prayers. Luthando paced the house, checking locks, peering out windows. Somewhere, in the shadows beyond their walls, Sibusiso watched. He had succeeded in planting fear. He had succeeded in twisting perception. He had succeeded in pushing Nolwazi to the edge. But he wasn't finished. Not yet. He was waiting for the moment when fear would become chaos. When chaos would become violence, and when violence would leave the household shattered forever. And that moment, dark and inevitable, was drawing near. The atmosphere inside the house shifted drastically after the discovery of Sibusiso's involvement. Yet instead of relief, the new awareness only added a sharper edge to the tension, like a knife pressed against a wound that had barely begun to close. Now that they had a name to attach to the chaos, fear took a different form, a form made of flesh, intent, and malicious strategy. For Nolwazi and Mama Zinla, this knowledge did not bring unity. It brought a fragile, uneasy quiet, stretched thin beneath the weight of suspicion and trauma. Luthando attempted to bring calm into the household, but his efforts felt like pouring water on a forest fire. Every corner of the house still held echoes of the past months. The broken objects, the hidden cameras, the ominous notes. Knowing that Sibusiso was behind it all did not erase the emotional scars. And for Nolwazi, the damage had already burrowed deep into her mind. Trauma once awakened was not so easily lulled back to sleep. Things worsened when the incidents escalated in subtle but deeply disturbing ways. One evening, Nolwazi found a single wet footprint on the hallway floor. It wasn't hers. It certainly wasn't Luthando's or Mama Zinla's. It appeared hours after they had all returned home. When she touched the print, her fingers quivered. Something about the coldness of the water felt too eerily familiar, too connected to the memories she spent her life trying to bury. On another night, as the family sat in the living room, the electricity flickered violently. The entire room dimmed, brightened, dimmed again. Mama Zinla gasped and clutched her chest. Nolwazi froze in terror, and when the lights stabilized, the front door, previously locked, stood slightly ajar. A chilling breeze drifted through the house. "He was here," Nolwazi whispered, trembling. "We don't know that," Luthando said, though even his voice shook. "He is playing with us," Mama Zinla murmured, staring at the door with wide, frightened eyes. Days passed like this, filled with unease, unexplained sounds, and constant glances over the shoulder. Even in moments of silence, the fear lingered like a presence in the room, invisible but palpable. One afternoon, Nolwazi was folding clothes on the bed when she heard a sharp crack behind her. She turned around and saw a photo frame on the floor. The glass shattered. It was a picture of her wedding day, a moment of pure joy now fractured in two. She felt a wave of nausea as she picked it up. The shard of glass sliced her finger, and blood dripped onto the image of her smiling face. She didn't scream this time. She simply sat down, feeling her chest tighten, the room spinning around her. When Luthando found her minutes later, her hands were trembling uncontrollably. "My love." "What happened?" he asked gently, but she couldn't answer. Her throat felt strangled by terror, by doubt, by a growing sense that she was being cornered not just by Sibusiso, but by her own collapsing mind. Meanwhile, Mama Zinla grew increasingly paranoid. The note warning her about Nolwazi haunted her. She replayed every argument, every sharp glance, every moment she had misinterpreted through fear. And now, even though she understood Sibusiso's role, her mind was poisoned with the seed he had planted. The fear clung to her like a parasite. One early morning, Luthando found her pacing the hallway, muttering prayers. "Mama, what are you doing awake?" he asked. "Someone was outside my window," she whispered. He checked. There were footprints in the soil beneath the window, fresh, unmistakable. Human. Fear wrapped around him like ice. They were not safe, and just when the tension seemed unbearable, the unseen tormentor pushed harder. The emotional collapse reached its peak during one of the worst confrontations between Nolwazi and Mama Zinla. It began with a broken plate, a simple household accident. Nolwazi, in her exhaustion, dropped it while washing dishes. The crash echoed through the house like a gunshot. Mama Zinla rushed in, eyes wide, thinking it was an attack. "What are you doing?" she cried. "It slipped," Nolwazi murmured, her voice barely audible. "You want me to fall? You are setting traps now." "No, I didn't." But Mama Zinla was in no state to listen. The months of fear had eroded her ability to separate truth from terror. "You are trying to kill me," she screamed. Nolwazi backed against the counter, shaking violently. "I'm not. I swear I'm not. You learned from your mother, didn't you? Violence runs in your blood." Those words cut deeper than any wound inflicted by Sibusiso's manipulations. Nolwazi froze. Her breathing quickened. The memory of her mother drowning surged into her mind with such force that she gasped aloud, clutching her head. The kitchen tiles beneath her feet seemed to ripple like water. The entire room blurred into a terrifying whirl of sound and color. Luthando burst in as the confrontation reached its breaking point. "What's happening?" he demanded. "She is trying to kill me," Mama Zinla cried, tears streaking her face. "I didn't," Nolwazi stammered, sliding to the floor. Luthando knelt beside her. "My love, look at me. Breathe." But Nolwazi couldn't. The room felt claustrophobic. The smell of water clung to her nostrils. She heard echoes of her stepfather's voice. She saw flashes of her mother's desperate hands reaching out of the bathtub. "I can't," she gasped. "I can't breathe." Luthando held her tightly, whispering soothing words. But her body shook uncontrollably, her mind spiraling deeper into panic. It took an hour for her to calm down, and by then, Luthando knew deep in his heart that something inside her was breaking beyond repair. The combination of trauma, manipulation, and constant fear was destroying her. He made a silent vow that night. He would protect her, no matter what. But he had no idea how soon that vow would be tested. Later that week, a new incident pushed Nolwazi even closer to the edge. She entered the bathroom to retrieve a towel, only to find the bathtub half filled with water, though no one had used it that day. A bar of soap floated on the surface, moving gently back and forth as though recently disturbed. Her breath hitched. She stumbled backward, gripping the sink for support. Her hands began to shake violently, When she leaned over the tub to turn off the tap, she saw something beneath the water, a distorted reflection of her mother's face. She screamed so loudly that both Luthando and Mama Zinla rushed to her. But by the time they arrived, Nolwazi was on the floor, sobbing hysterically. "I saw her," she cried. "I saw my mother." Luthando held her, his own fear growing. "You're exhausted. You're remembering things from your past." "No," she whispered. She was here. Mama Zinla stood at the doorway, trembling. Her fear of Nolwazi, of the house, of the shadow haunting them, all collided into a single chilling thought. The bathroom was becoming a battleground, a place where past trauma and present manipulation collided, a place where fear thrived. And Sibusiso knew this. He had chosen the bathroom deliberately, because he understood exactly what that room meant to Nolwazi. He understood how easily trauma could be triggered, how quickly panic could turn into violence, how perfectly water could become a weapon. Over the next few days, the tension simmered dangerously. Every word exchanged in the house felt like a spark, waiting to ignite something catastrophic. Nolwazi grew more unstable, more fearful, more lost in memories and illusions. Mama Zinla grew more paranoid, more convinced that the danger was internal rather than external, and Sibusiso remained invisible, but his presence grew stronger. He watched, he waited, he prepared the final move, until the moment when all three, fearful, exhausted, and psychologically unraveling, would find themselves in the same place, at the same time. The bathroom, where tragedy would no longer be a memory, it would become reality. The house had become a labyrinth of tension, each hallway a corridor of whispers, each room holding memories too heavy for the walls to bear, and the bathroom, more than any other place, throbbed with an energy so unsettling that even stepping near it made Nolwazi's skin crawl. Yet fate, or perhaps the cruel hand orchestrating everything, ensured that this very room would become the stage for the next escalation, one that would push everyone closer to the brink. It began unexpectedly on an afternoon wrapped in uncomfortable stillness. Nolwazi had spent the morning in bed, staring at the ceiling while her thoughts drifted between fragments of the past and present. Her mind felt like broken glass, each memory sharp, disjointed, and impossible to hold without bleeding. Luthando urged her to rest, but rest had become impossible. Shadows moved in her periphery. Sounds echoed when the house should have been quiet, and the air itself seemed charged with dread. Meanwhile, Mama Zinla sat silently in her room, Bible in hand. Though she had read the same page for hours without understanding a word, fear had seeped into her bones. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind brushing the window, every faint vibration of the walls felt like a threat. Her heart raced constantly, pulsing with a mixture of paranoia and exhaustion. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about Nolwazi's supposed intentions. Instead, she wondered if something far darker, far more evil had been invited into their home. But beneath all that fear, something else stirred inside her. Guilt. Guilt for the harsh words. Guilt for her accusations. Guilt for seeing a monster where there had been a hurting, frightened woman. She had never apologized. She didn't know if she could, but the words weighed on her chest like stones. That weight pushed her out of her room and down the hallway toward the kitchen. Halfway there, she found herself standing near the bathroom door, which was slightly ajar. Something she couldn't explain what drew her closer. Inside, Nolwazi stood at the sink, staring into the mirror with vacant, glassy eyes. At first glance, it seemed like she was simply lost in thought, but as Mama Zinla stepped closer, she realized Nolwazi's reflection looked wrong. Not angry, not fearful, just empty, like a person whose soul was drifting somewhere between life and memory. "Child," Mama Zinla said hesitantly, her voice softening in a way it never had before. Nolwazi blinked, as if waking from a dream. She turned slowly toward her mother-in-law. "Mama," she whispered, surprised at the gentleness in her own voice. The unexpected peace between them lasted only seconds. Suddenly the light flickered just once, but with enough force to send a chill skittering up both of their spines. The faucet behind them sputtered, then began running on its own, water pouring into the sink even though neither had touched the handle. Nolwazi gasped and stumbled backward, her breath quickening. The sound of water, persistent and rhythmic, pulled her deeper into panic. Memories surged forward, her mother's screams, the violent splashing, the suffocating pressure of water. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, no." Mama Zinla reached for her. "Calm down, my child." But as soon as her hand touched Nolwazi's arm, Nolwazi screamed a raw, terrified scream that echoed through the entire house. "Let go of me," she cried, jerking away. The scream brought Luthando running from the living room. He burst into the bathroom to find his wife trembling uncontrollably, while his mother stood frozen, her hand still half extended. The water continued running behind them, splashing violently into the sink. "What's happening?" he demanded. She frightened me," Nolwazi gasped. "The water, Mama, please don't. I wasn't trying to hurt you," Mama Zinla said, her voice cracking. "I only wanted to help." But the fear in Nolwazi's eyes was too strong. She wasn't seeing Mama Zinla. She was seeing her stepfather looming, angry, dangerous. "Mama," Luthando said gently, "please step outside." "No," she said firmly. "We need to talk. She needs to understand. I don't want her harmed." This isn't the time. I said we need to talk." Mama Zinla snapped, her own frayed nerves breaking. The raised voice triggered Nolwazi instantly. She staggered back, clutching the edge of the bathtub for support. The cold porcelain sent a shock through her body. She glimpsed the still water inside the tub left over from the morning's failed plumbing inspection, and her breath hitched violently. "Not water," she whispered. "Please, not water." Her knees buckled, and she slid toward the floor. Luthando rushed to her, supporting her weight as she collapsed into his arms. "We shouldn't be in this room," he murmured, trying to guide her out, but the door suddenly slammed shut on its own. All three froze. A moment later, a faint clicking sound echoed like someone turning the lock from the outside. But there was no one else in the house, or so they believed. "Who did that?" Mama Zinla gasped. "It's the wind," Luthando said, though the tremor in his voice betrayed his disbelief. "There is no wind strong enough to lock a door," she whispered. Nolwazi looked up slowly, her eyes unfocused. "He's here," she said. "He's in the house." Before Luthando could respond, Nolwazi lifted her head and stared into the mirror. Her reflection pale, trembling did not mirror her movements. Instead, it tilted its head at a slight angle, almost questioningly. She screamed again, covering her eyes. "Stop!" Luthando cried, pulling her close. The moment shattered when a loud crash echoed outside the bathroom, a noise like something being knocked over in the hallway. All three flinched. "That was him," Nolwazi whispered. "That was Sibusiso," Mama Zinla corrected, though even she sounded unconvinced. Luthando forced the bathroom door open with his shoulder, leading his wife out first. But Mama Zinla lingered behind for a moment, staring into the room with a haunted expression. The bathroom felt alive, watching, listening. As they re-entered the hallway, the lights flickered again, longer this time. The shadows on the walls stretched unnaturally, bending in ways that made all three of them instinctively huddle closer together. It was then that Nolwazi turned to Mama Zinla with trembling lips. "I didn't want this," she whispered. "I didn't want us to hurt each other." For the first time, the older woman's eyes softened with true remorse. "I know, child," she whispered. "I know." But whatever fragile peace blossomed between them was short-lived, because at that exact moment, a phone buzzed loudly on the hallway table. All three jumped. It was Mama Zinla's phone. A new message. With shaking hands, she picked it up. One sentence glowed on the screen. "Tonight, the truth will drown." A chill so deep it felt suffocating filled the hallway. "That devil," Mama Zinla whispered. "He's pushing us toward something." Luthando clenched his jaw. "We won't let him win." But even as he said the words, a dreadful certainty settled deep in his chest. Sibusiso was not simply watching anymore. He was preparing to strike, to manipulate, to orchestrate the perfect moment, And now he knew exactly where the family was weakest. The bathroom. The room tied to Nolwazi's deepest trauma. The room where fear transformed into panic. The room where one wrong move, one misunderstanding, one scream could turn into irreversible tragedy. As the evening crept closer, the sense of impending doom thickened in the air. None of them slept. None of them spoke. And none of them realized that the person watching them was already inside the house, waiting, listening, ready. Evening settled over the house like a suffocating fog, thick and heavy with an unseen threat. The quiet felt unnatural, too deliberate, too purposeful, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Luthando tried to keep the house brightly lit, checking each window twice, locking every door. But no amount of security could shake the sense that something sinister was drawing nearer, creeping closer with each passing second. Nolwazi sat curled tightly on the living room couch, clutching a pillow to her chest as though it were a lifeline. Her eyes darted to every shadow, every flicker of movement, every whisper of sound. She was unraveling visibly now, her breath short and shallow, her skin clammy, her hands trembling. Mama Zinla sat stiffly across from her, wringing her hands. Fear lined her face deeply, but there was something else there too. Regret, guilt, the weight of months of suspicion pressing down on her. The new awareness of Sibusiso's manipulation had shaken her, but it had not erased her fear of Nolwazi. "We cannot stay like this," she murmured, voice unsteady. "If that man is inside this house, we must act." "We will," Luthando replied, "but we need to think clearly. Fear is exactly what he wants from us." But as he said the words, he felt his own resolve falter. His stomach churned with anxiety. He kept imagining someone Sibusiso lurking behind every door, watching through every crack. Then came the first sound, a soft thump from the back hallway. Everyone froze. "Did you hear that?" Nolwazi whispered. "Yes," Luthando said, instinctively positioning himself between the women and the hallway. "Stay here." "No." Nolwazi grabbed his arm. "Don't leave us." He hesitated, torn between fear and responsibility, but before he could decide, the house shifted again, a faint clicking sound, almost like a latch being undone. It came from the direction of the bathroom. Nolwazi's breath hitched, her body curling tighter. "Not the bathroom. Please, not there." Mama Zinla swallowed hard. "We cannot let him control us." But even she sounded unconvinced. Luthando took a slow step toward the hallway, then another. Then, a sudden crash. The sound split through the silence like a scream. Nolwazi yelped, covering her ears. Mama Zinla gasped, clutching her chest. "It came from the bathroom," Luthando whispered. "No," Nolwazi begged. "Don't go in there." But the noise repeated, a violent, shattering sound followed by a low murmur, almost like a voice. That was enough to propel Luthando forward. He strode down the hallway, heart pounding, fists clenched at his sides. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness visible beyond the frame. "Mama, Nolwazi, stay back," he ordered, but neither listened. Both women followed at a distance, compelled by fear, dread, and morbid curiosity. Luthando pushed the door open with a trembling hand, and froze. The mirror above the sink was shattered, shards glittering across the floor like ice. The shower curtain fluttered slightly, though there was no breeze. The bathtub was completely full again, water swirling slowly as if something had just moved through it. No one else was in the room, but the presence was undeniable. Nolwazi's breathing quickened dangerously. "He's here. He's here." She backed away, bumping into something solid. Mama Zinla, the older woman, turned around sharply, startled by the contact. Both women locked eyes. For a moment, time suspended between them, weeks of misunderstanding, months of tension, and years of unspoken wounds all suspended in that fragile space. But then, a figure moved. In the corner of the bathroom, behind the open door, something shifted just enough to catch Luthando's eye. "Sibusiso," he whispered. Before he could react, the shadow bolted. Luthando lunged, grabbing at the figure's shirt, but it slipped from his grasp. Sibusiso shoved him hard and darted down the hallway. "Stop him!" Luthando shouted, giving chase. But Sibusiso was quick. He ducked into the dark corridor, his footsteps pounding against the wooden floor. In the bathroom, Nolwazi collapsed against the tub for support, her vision blurring, her mind spiraling into memory and terror. The water in the bathtub seemed to pulse, rippling in rhythmic patterns that echoed her childhood trauma. "Mama," she whimpered, staring at the water as though it were a living creature. Mama Zinla approached her cautiously. "Nolwazi, listen to me." But she didn't get to finish. A sudden slam sounded from somewhere deeper in the house, a door shut forcefully, then another, then a heavy thud as though furniture had been pushed. "He's trying to trap us," Mama Zinla whispered. "No," Nolwazi said faintly, gripping the edge of the tub. He wants us in here." Her voice cracked, and she pressed both hands against her temples as memories stabbed through her mind. Her mother's screams, the violent splashing, the cold water closing over a face full of desperation, the helplessness, the guilt. It was too much. "Make it stop," she sobbed. "Please, make it stop." The sound of water gushing suddenly filled the room as the bathtub faucet switched on by itself, fully open, roaring with impossible force. The water level surged. Mama Zinla panicked. "Turn it off! Turn it off!" But Nolwazi backed away from the tub as though it were a monster. She shook violently, unable to approach. Then, a hand appeared behind her, not a stranger's, hers. She lifted it toward the faucet without understanding why. The movement felt distant, like she was watching her own body from outside her skin, as if her trauma were guiding her actions, not her conscious mind. "Don't," Mama Zinla whispered, stepping closer. "Nolwazi, look at me, child." But Nolwazi's eyes were fixed on the water, the reflection of a drowning woman that only she could see. "Mama," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I couldn't save her." "You were a child," Mama Zinla said, reaching out gently. "It wasn't your fault." But the words did not reach her. Instead, something else did, a whisper behind her ear. Soft, venomous, unmistakably male. "Finish what you started." She spun around, but no one was there. The whisper wasn't real, but in her fragile state, it became real. And Sibusiso, watching silently from the hallway corner, smiled. Everything was working. Everything was escalating exactly as he had planned. Now, all that was left was for panic to become action, for fear to become violence, for trauma to collide with reality, and for Nolwazi, teetering at the edge of her sanity, to make the mistake he had spent months engineering. A mistake involving water, a mistake involving Mama Zinla, a mistake that, once made, could never be undone. The bathroom hummed with tension as mother-in-law and daughter-in-law faced each other, one trembling with trauma, the other trembling with fear. Outside the room, the house fell eerily silent. Sibusiso watched through the slit in the doorway, waiting for the moment when he would strike again. Not with his hands, but with the final push that would send everything spiraling into tragedy. And that push was coming. Soon, very soon. The house had never felt so silent, so breathless, as though the very air knew something terrible was about to unfold. The shadows in the hallway stretched unnaturally long, clinging to walls and corners like dark fingers. The light bulb above the bathroom flickered weakly, its glow trembling as much as the people standing beneath it, and hidden just out of view. Sibusiso watched, hungry for the destruction he had engineered for months. Inside the bathroom, Nolwazi trembled violently, tears streaking her face as she backed away from the overflowing bathtub. Water sloshed over the rim, spreading across the floor like an unwelcome tide. Every splash triggered another flashback. Her mother's muffled cries, the violent thrashing, the helplessness that had crushed her young heart. "No, no, not again. I can't," she whispered, hands shaking uncontrollably. Mama Zinla reached out slowly, as though approaching a frightened animal. "Child, listen to me. You are safe. You must come away from the water. But Nolwazi wasn't hearing her. She wasn't seeing her. Her mind drifted in and out of the past, her mother's face superimposing itself over Mama Zinla's concerned expression. "Why didn't you save me?" a phantom voice whispered inside her mind. "I tried," Nolwazi sobbed. "I tried, Mama. You watched me drown." "No, I didn't want. Please stop, please." Her hands rose to her head, gripping her hair as if trying to tear the memories out. Mama Zinla glanced toward the hallway desperately. "Luthando, help us." But her voice was swallowed by the sound of rushing water. Moments earlier, Luthando had been chasing Sibusiso through the house. The intruder moved with calculated precision, knocking objects over to create confusion, slamming doors to distort direction, and staying just far enough ahead to keep Luthando guessing. The chase led toward the back of the house, a perfect diversion, because the real target, the real chaos, was happening in the bathroom. Breathing hard, convinced he was getting closer, Luthando rushed toward the kitchen, only for a shadow to slip past him in the opposite direction. He spun around. "Sibusiso," he yelled, sprinting back through the hallway. But Sibusiso had already melted into the darkness. A second later, a scream echoed. Nolwazi's scream, raw, terrified, broken. Luthando's blood turned to ice. He raced down the hallway, nearly slipping on the wooden floor. As he approached the bathroom, the scene hit him with the force of a nightmare he never imagined could be real. Nolwazi was hunched beside the bathtub, gripping its edge with trembling fingers. Her other hand was pressed against Mama Zinla's shoulder, not violently, but out of sheer panic as she tried to steady herself. But to Luthando, arriving mid-chaos, the perspective was devastating. It looked like Nolwazi was trying to push his mother into the tub. "Mama!" he shouted. At the sound of his voice, Nolwazi startled, her eyes widening with terror. She turned toward him, but her movement, uncontrolled and disoriented, caused her hand to slip. In that split second, her palm pressed against Mama Zinla's back, pushing the older woman forward. Mama Zinla gasped as her knee buckled on the wet floor. She stumbled, her hands slipping along the porcelain. Her upper body lurched closer to the water. "No," Nolwazi cried, reaching out in desperation not to push, but to pull her back. But Luthando didn't see that. He saw only the posture, the angle, the moment where trauma, fear, and chance created the illusion of attack. "What are you doing?" he roared, lunging forward. His voice boomed with shock, betrayal, and terror. Nolwazi froze, her heart splitting open as she realized what he thought he was seeing. "Luthando, please, it's not what you think." But he was already pulling her away, shoving her back with such force that she slipped on the wet floor and fell hard against the tiles. Mama Zinla collapsed to her knees, coughing violently as she tried to regain her balance. "Mama!" Luthando cried, helping her up. Nolwazi scrambled into a sitting position, tears pouring down her face. I wasn't hurting her, I swear I wasn't." But her voice fell on the ears of a man drowning in fear, a man who had walked into the one scene he was psychologically primed to misunderstand. "Stay away from her," he warned sternly, positioning himself between the two women. Nolwazi shook her head violently. No, you don't understand. I was trying to help, I was frightened, I thought. You were pushing her into the water," he shouted. "No, that's not." But he didn't listen. He couldn't listen. His world, the fragile home he'd tried desperately to rebuild, felt like it was collapsing right before his eyes. And his heart, stretched between mother and wife for months, finally cracked under the weight of misinterpretation. As if on cue, a soft shuffle echoed through the hallway. Sibusiso watched from the shadows, eyes gleaming with satisfaction. He had planned everything with meticulous cruelty. The broken lights, the overflowing tub, the locked door, the altered perspective, the moment of misunderstanding. And now the final stage was unfolding perfectly. He retreated silently, disappearing before anyone could sense his presence. Inside the bathroom, the emotional storm intensified. "Mama, are you hurt?" Luthando asked, steadying her as she clutched the tub for support. She hesitated, torn between fear, confusion, and a dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, Nolwazi had not intended to harm her. "I slipped," she whispered. But Luthando didn't hear her subtle shift. He only heard danger. Nolwazi crawled forward on her hands and knees, desperation twisting her voice. "Please, Luthando, you have to believe me. The water." I panicked. I couldn't breathe. "Don't come closer," he warned. She froze, and something inside her broke cleanly, painfully, irrevocably. The man she loved no longer saw her. The woman she wanted to call Mama feared her. And the shadow orchestrating everything had succeeded in isolating her completely. The walls of the bathroom felt like they were closing in, squeezing her chest. Her hands shook violently. The reflection in the shattered mirror taunted her, a woman lost, terrified, misunderstood. "I'm not a monster," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. Silence answered her, silence thicker than accusation, silence more suffocating than drowning. Luthando finally helped Mama Zinla stand and guided her toward the doorway. "We're getting out of this room," he muttered. Before leaving, he glanced back at Nolwazi, his expression a mixture of fear, confusion, and heartbreak. "I don't know what's happening to you," he said quietly, "but you need help." The words stabbed her like knives. As they left the bathroom, Nolwazi remained on the wet floor, hugging herself tightly as she rocked back and forth. Tears blurred her vision. Her heart shattered. Her whispered plea drifted into the dense, heavy air. "Please, don't leave me alone." But they left. They had to. They didn't understand the danger. And behind the hallway corner, Sibusiso smiled. The tragedy was right where he wanted it. One more push, one last moment, and everything would fall apart exactly as he had planned. The hallway pulsed with tension as Luthando guided his trembling mother toward her bedroom, the air so heavy it felt almost alive. He kept glancing over his shoulder, his mind racing, replaying the scene in the bathroom, his wife's hands near the water, the fear in his mother's eyes, the way the situation looked when he walked in. His heart was a battlefield, one side screaming that Nolwazi would never intentionally hurt anyone, the other side terrified that something dark had taken control of her mind. Behind them, Nolwazi remained curled on the wet bathroom floor, muffled sobs echoing softly against the tiles. The water from the overflowing tub continued to spread slowly across the floor. Reaching the doorway as if trying to chase after them, "Mama, sit here," Luthando said gently as he helped his mother onto the edge of her bed. But Mama Zinla couldn't stop shaking. "Son, she wasn't trying to kill me," she whispered suddenly. Luthando froze. Her words were barely audible, hesitant, fragile, but they hit him with the force of a hammer. "What did you say?" he asked, kneeling in front of her. "She didn't push me. She touched me, yes, but her hands were trembling. I felt fear, not aggression." He swallowed hard. "But when I walked in, you saw what you feared," she murmured, "not what happened." He sat back on his heels, stunned. For the first time, Mama Zinla wasn't feeding suspicion. She was dismantling it. "I think she's being tormented," she continued. "Not by demons, not by madness, but by someone who wants us to believe she is dangerous." Her voice cracked with remorse. "And I let myself believe it. I let him manipulate me." "Him?" Luthando asked sharply. "You mean Sibusiso?" Before she could respond, a faint creak sounded from the hallway. Luthando's head snapped up. Footsteps, soft, slow, deliberate, approached their room. He rose to his feet silently, muscles tensing like a predator, sensing another predator. Then, the footsteps stopped just outside the door. A breath barely audible, but unmistakable, whispered through the crack. Luthando flung the door open. The hallway was empty, but not entirely. A faint scent of sweat and soil hung in the air. A disturbance on the rug hinted at someone stepping back quickly. A whisper of movement near the corner made his instincts flare. "Sibusiso," he shouted, sprinting down the hallway. "Mama, lock the door," he commanded without turning back. He reached the end of the hallway just as a shadow slipped into the living room. He followed, adrenaline burning through him. The living room was dim, lit only by the flickering bulb above. The curtains shifted slightly as though someone had brushed past them moments ago. A second later, a figure bolted toward the back door. Luthando gave chase. He tackled the intruder just as he reached the threshold, sending both of them crashing to the ground. Furniture toppled, a lamp shattered, and the house shook with the force of their struggle. "You ruined everything," Sibusiso snarled, trying to wrench free. "Why?" Luthando roared. "Why are you doing this to us? You think you deserve the life you have," Sibusiso spat. "You think you deserve the inheritance that should have been mine." Luthando punched him across the jaw, rage boiling over. "You terrorized my wife. You terrorized my mother. You destroyed our home." Sibusiso laughed a wild, unhinged sound. "That woman was already broken. I just gave her a little push." Luthando's blood turned to fire. "You manipulated her trauma," he growled. "You planted cameras. You stalked us. You sent those messages. And I was going to finish it tonight," Sibusiso hissed. "One more scare, one more little shove, and she would have drowned your mother for me." The admission detonated inside Luthando's skull. "You monster!" he roared. He tackled Sibusiso again, dragging him across the floor. The two men fought fiercely, punches, kicks, elbows. Sibusiso managed to land blows of his own. Fueled by desperation and spite, they crashed into a shelf, sending books and ornaments raining down around them. But Luthando was stronger. Fueled by betrayal, grief, and fury, he pinned Sibusiso down, slamming his fist into his cousin's jaw repeatedly until the man's resistance weakened. Behind him, a terrified voice cried out, "Luthando!" He spun around. Nolwazi stood in the hallway, her face streaked with tears, her eyes wide with fear and shock. Water dripped from her clothing. She had crawled out of the bathroom and followed the sound of the fight. "Please," she whispered, Don't become like him." Her plea snapped him out of his rage. He released his grip on Sibusiso, breathing hard. At that moment, blue and red lights flashed outside the window. Neighbors had called the police after hearing the screams and crashes. As officers burst through the door, Sibusiso made one last desperate attempt to escape, but Luthando seized him and forced him to the ground. "That's him," Luthando shouted. "He's been breaking into our home. He planted cameras. He terrorized us." The officers subdued Sibusiso quickly. He shouted curses as they dragged him away. "You think this changes anything?" he spat. "She will always be broken. You will never trust her again. The damage is done." His voice faded as he was pulled outside. Silence settled over the house again, heavy, painful, irreversible. Luthando turned to Nolwazi slowly. She stood trembling, arms wrapped around herself as though she were holding the pieces of her heart together. "I didn't hurt her," she whispered. "I didn't mean for anything to happen." Luthando's face softened with heartbreak and guilt. "I know," he said gently. "I know now." He took a step toward her. She flinched, not because of him, but because she no longer knew what her own mind was capable of. "Mama," Luthando called softly. Mama Zinla approached slowly from her room, her steps unsteady. She looked at Nolwazi with new eyes, not suspicion, but remorse. "I misjudged you," she whispered. "I let fear poison me. I am so sorry, child." The apology, a rare, genuine one, broke something inside Nolwazi. She sobbed, collapsing into Luthando's arms. He held her tightly, tears filling his own eyes. But as he held his fragile wife, he noticed something that made his heart stop. Wet footprints, leading from the bathroom to where Nolwazi stood. But some prints did not match her feet. They were larger, heavier, made by someone who had walked ahead of her, not behind. His stomach twisted with dread. Before he could investigate further, a faint thud echoed from the bathroom, the sound of something falling over. And just like that, everything, the understanding, the reconciliation, the moment of calm spiraled back into fear. Because Sibusiso might have been caught, but he wasn't working alone tonight. Or worse, he had set something else in motion, something already inside the house, something waiting in the bathroom. Luthando's breath hitched. The tragedy wasn't over. Not yet. For a few suspended seconds, the house returned to an uncanny stillness, as if the very walls were afraid to breathe. Outside, police radios crackled faintly as officers led Sibusiso toward their car. But inside, every sound seemed muted. Beneath the suffocating weight of dread, Luthando stared at the wet footprints on the floor, the ones that didn't match Nolwazi's. He followed them with his eyes, each step of water glistening beneath the hallway light, leading directly back toward the bathroom. A cold shiver crawled up his spine. "Stay here," he whispered to Nolwazi. "No," she murmured, voice shaking. "No, don't go in there alone." But he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now. Mama is with you." Mama Zinla stepped closer to Nolwazi, still trembling from the confrontation, but determined not to let fear dictate her actions anymore. She held the younger woman's hand gently, a gesture of protection, not mistrust. "Be careful, my son," she whispered. Luthando nodded and turned toward the bathroom. The closer he walked, the heavier the air became. The sound of a dripping faucet echoed down the hallway, slow, rhythmic, steady. The kind of sound that had once meant nothing, but now carried menace. He reached the doorway and stopped. The bathroom looked exactly as chaotic as before, the water overflowing from the tub, reflecting jagged fragments of the broken mirror on the floor. Steam fogged the air. Even though the water wasn't hot, the shower curtain fluttered softly, as if brushed by a hand, but no one was inside. He scanned the corners, the ceiling vent, even behind the door. Nothing. Yet the uneasy feeling gnawed at him, an instinct honed by months of manipulation and fear. Then something caught his eye. A movement, a shape, a reflection. Behind him, he spun around, but the hallway was empty. He exhaled shakily and stepped deeper into the room. The water's surface rippled again, though nothing had touched it. Ripples became waves. Waves became churning motion, as if something beneath the surface were moving. Not possible, he thought. It's just water. But every instinct screamed otherwise. He knelt to reach for the faucet handle, determined to shut the water off once and for all. That was when everything collapsed into tragedy. A scream pierced the air, high, shrill, agonizing. Not from the bathroom, from the hallway. "Mama!" Luthando bolted upright and rushed out, his heart slamming against his ribs. The sight he saw would haunt him forever. Mama Zinla lay collapsed on the floor beside Nolwazi, her body limp, her breathing shallow. Her eyes fluttered but did not fully open. Nolwazi knelt beside her, hysterical, trying desperately to lift her head. She fell, she just fell, Mama. Please, please. But then something else caught his attention. Footsteps, wet footsteps, approaching, not from behind him, from the direction of the front of the house. He lunged toward the living room and saw a dark figure dart out the front door. Not Sibusiso, someone smaller, quicker, face concealed beneath a hood. "Stop," Luthando roared, sprinting after the figure. But as he reached the porch, the figure had already vanished into the night. Panic surged through him. If this person had been working with Sibusiso, then the terror they experienced tonight was only one piece of a larger scheme. But he couldn't chase shadows now. His mother needed help. His wife needed him. He rushed back inside. "Mama, please stay with me," Nolwazi cried, her voice raw. Luthando knelt and checked her pulse. It was faint, alarmingly faint. Her breathing was uneven. "We need to get her to the hospital," he said urgently. He scooped her into his arms. Nolwazi grabbed a shawl to wrap around her, hands trembling violently. "Is she dying?" Nolwazi whimpered. "No," Luthando reassured, though fear burned in his own chest. "We'll get her help. She'll be all right." But as he carried his mother toward the door, Nolwazi stumbled, gripping the wall. "Come on," he said gently. "Stay close to me." Her legs barely held her upright. The trauma of the night had ripped open wounds she had worked years to keep sealed. Outside, blue lights from the police car flashed, painting the house in shifting hues of sorrow. An officer opened the back door quickly. "Is she injured?" "She collapsed, please. We need an ambulance." The officer radioed for emergency services immediately. Two others approached, guiding Luthando to lay his mother down safely while they monitored her breathing. Meanwhile, another officer took Nolwazi aside to ask her questions, but she shook uncontrollably, unable to form coherent answers. "She's in shock," Luthando said. "Please, give her space." Minutes later, paramedics arrived. They lifted Mama Zinla onto a stretcher and began checking her vitals. She stirred weakly, opening her eyes just long enough to see Nolwazi leaning over her. "Mama, I'm so sorry," Nolwazi whispered. A faint smile, heart-wrenching in its fragility, touched the older woman's lips. "You are not to blame," she breathed, and for the first time, she called Nolwazi by the name she deserved, "my daughter." Tears streamed down Nolwazi's cheeks. But the tragedy was not finished. As they prepared to load Mama Zinla into the ambulance, one of the officers approached Luthando. "Sir, we found something outside your bathroom window." Luthando frowned. "What is it?" The officer held up a small waterproof device, another camera. But this one wasn't like the others. It was live, streaming. Someone had been watching them, in real time. During the entire ordeal, Nolwazi gasped, stepping back as though struck. Luthando's breath faltered. "Where does it transmit to?" "We're tracking the signal now," the officer said. "It's moving. Whoever took off just now, they're the one receiving it. The shadowy figure, not Sibusiso. Someone else entirely. A second accomplice." Luthando's stomach twisted. If Sibusiso had been acting with someone still free, still watching, then the nightmare was far from over. But first, he had to save his mother. He climbed into the ambulance beside her. Nolwazi reached for his hand before he left. "Luthando," she whispered, Do you believe me now?" He squeezed her hand tightly, his voice cracking. "With all my heart." She collapsed into sobs as the doors shut. The ambulance sped into the night, leaving behind a house overflowing with water, shattered glass, broken trust, and a darkness still lurking unseen. But the tragedy reached its final blow in the hospital waiting room. 2 hours later, a doctor approached them with solemn eyes. "I'm sorry. We did everything we could." Nolwazi collapsed into Luthando's arms. A wail tore from her chest, raw, primal, excruciating. Luthando held her tightly, tears streaming down his face as the truth thundered through him. His mother was gone, not drowned, not murdered, but taken by the sheer weight of fear, stress, and emotional torment inflicted by a man driven by envy and cruelty. And yet, Sibusiso was not the only one responsible. He had had help, someone who was still watching, someone who had escaped, someone who had set the stage for tragedy and vanished into the night. But for now, all Luthando could do was hold the woman he loved, broken, traumatized, but innocent, and grieve the mother he had lost. Outside the hospital window, the wind whispered against the glass. Somewhere in the darkness, a camera feed shut off, and silence swallowed the night.